And Ruth is one of the books that was demanded by the Levitical priesthood that be read at Pentecost. The one-day celebration, which followed 50 days after Passover. So this being very important, but what does it do? Well, the book of Ruth absolutely gives credentials to the birth of both David and Messiah. It was necessary. But here we have a Moabite woman, and many people call the Moabites Gentiles. They were not. They were of the family of Adam. They came through Abraham's brother, because Lot was Abraham's nephew, and Lot would be the father of Moab, and so it was. So you have to give credentials where credentials are due. Now, you've heard me mention 2 or 3 times in the lecture so far that one of the most important things taught in this particular book is kinsman redeemer. What this does, it is a law, an old law, and it still applies to even Christ today. So I want to go back and pick up that law in the book of Deuteronomy so you're familiar with it, or you're going to have difficulty understanding the rest of the book of Ruth. So open your Bibles to the 25th chapter of Deuteronomy. You won't have it. I'll read it for you. And we'll pick it up in verse 4 as you're turning there, because thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he treadeth out the corn. That means when you're winnowing and when the ox is beating the grain from the sheave, well, certainly you can't prevent him from reaching down and getting a mouthful of barley or wheat. The word corn is used, and that is, it simply means the grain from the head or the sheath, which in these 2 cases it was barley and wheat, not the corn that we know as maize, as the Indians would call it, of today. But now comes the law of kinsman redeemer, and it's important. Verse 5 of Deuteronomy 25. If brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger, but husband's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. That's the law of kinsman redeemer. Why? Verse 6. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. In other words, it continued if someone was murdered or something else. It kept their name and their seed going in the house of Israel, God's house. Verse 7, and if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders. The gate is where the judgment seat. And say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Verse 8, what happens then? These things may seem strange. They're very important to understanding the rest of Ruth, so listen closely. Verse 8. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him, and if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, don't want to. 9, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house. And verse 10, and his name shall be called in Israel the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. This is a custom in the East that is still practiced to this day. If you take a shoe off and hit somebody with it, that's the soul, okay, and so forth. And it is practiced even to this day. That is to say, the tossing of shoes. You might remember when a reporter tossed his shoes at our president at a particular meeting at one time in Iraq. Okay, so having said that, we come. Naomi knows that, or feels that Boaz is the next of kin to her, and certainly that puts Ruth as next of kin. And with Ruth's husband being dead, then as kinsman redeemer, it is Boaz's duty to perform this act of kinsman and take Ruth to wife. Okay. So, inasmuch as Ruth had already, Boaz was taken with her, because even when he invited her, not as you usually would, somebody that was gleaning, he invited her to come right in and eat the lunch with his crew, and he would even take some parched corn, which really was barley, because at the first harvest, which is steamed slightly until it's softened, and not bad, good protein. He would slip this to her, and she took that as Ruth would, and took what was left over to her mother-in-law, Naomi, and shared that with her. And Naomi, on finding out that she had been in the field of Boaz and how he had accepted her, that is to say, treated her well, protected her from the young men, that they could not abuse her or anyone else, and Boaz had instructed her, you be sure you stay in my field in gleaning. So we pick it up then with chapter 3, after Ruth has returned home, has shared this with Naomi. Everybody loved Naomi, don't forget that. Her name carried, well, a precious one, and everybody considered her that. Chapter 3, verse 1, that word of wisdom from our Father, and it reads, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? In other words, I want to find you a good home. I'm not going to last forever. I want to find you a good home where you'll be comfortable and well taken care of. Verse 2, And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? And the answer, of course, is yes. Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. In other words, it was the young men and others, but it was the master's duty to winnoweth. This would be to guard at night the grain that was being harvested, that no one could take it right off the threshing floor. So winnoweth means when the ox has beat the grain from the sheave. You, in the evening wind, when the breeze is blowing, you pick it up and toss it or sift it, and the wind blows the chaff away, and the rich grain falls straight down, and it's harvested. So, but then when the day is finished, the master usually stayed, and the reason Ruth would know it, to where the winnoweth would take place, the threshing floor, to guard his property. So she knew from experience he would be there. Verse 3, What